is here. Kim is here. Peter is here. It's amazing how much you can do from your living room. All right.
The last year of education summed up in one sentence.
We're missing Stephen, but I do not see him. Oh, here he is. Steve, there we go. All right. I'm going to turn this over to the capable hands of Clay. And just so you know, the topic for this session is how did you bring social and emotional learning into your class online? However, as is typical of anything that Laura does, you don't have to follow the rules. So how do you bring interesting things to this conversation is equally valid.
And of course, as we've heard, in Yvonne's comments about crickets and student engagement, the social and emotional question comes up whenever you address these, because a big part of any learning environment is the kind of lateral and peer-based relations that students might have with each other. So we have an amazing group of co-conspirators: Stephen Gilman from MakerState, Karen Kahn from Makeosity, Peter Seo from Nori, Kim Smith from Learning Beautiful, Ashley Jane Lewis from Nerd Night International. We'll just go in that order. I will ask you all, as is by now the obvious format, to make some remarks, and then we'll have a conversation with the time we have left. So Stephen, let me turn it over to you.
Thanks, Clay. So good to be here. Let me say thanks to Laura and RoboFun first for putting all this together. I'm a huge fan for years of Laura and RoboFun, and so many folks on this call today that are pioneers in STEM and coding and makerspace education. So it's an honor to be with you here today. I'm just one more fellow traveler in this hardy group doing makerspace and maker-based learning with kids with MakerState. MakerState has been working about 8 years now in public schools, private schools, and community organizations like DYCD to bring coding and 3D design and engineering and rocket science and lots of hands-on building projects to kids, and mostly in New York and nationwide. And we've been privileged to be CS for All trainers with the NYC DOE, training teachers, and to bring coding to all schools, and with the National Science Foundation to do the same. And I would love to just share screen real quick, just to show you a couple of those projects. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, great. So just a few of the things that we're doing that are targeting social emotional learning in particular at home. So like a lot of us, as soon as schools closed, we got online and did the best we could. Fortunately, with the NSF grant that we were in a few years ago, we created an online learning platform where we got many of our projects online so that kids could learn and teachers could learn how to incorporate those into like ELA, math, science, and that kind of thing. So we were a step ahead in that regard, but we learned so much through a good number of mistakes. And that's the way we ask our kids to learn as well. So a few of those projects, speaking of that engineering design process, so we boiled down the engineering design process, which is usually 5 or 6 steps, into just 3 steps for elementary age kids. Discover, create, and improve. A lot of mistakes happen in that process. We encourage that and try to provide that emotional support and that space to discuss and explore our feelings about what we've created and what we're collaborating on with other students. And so that would be an example of a SEL informed approach. Another example is in the upper right here, the Tradables 3D Design Values Currency Project. So we start with where the kids are at and what they value in their community, with their families, with their schools, and what we have to teach them, or where it's our mission to teach them 3D design and printing. We're doing that with where the kids are at. So what do they care about? What are their values? They 3D design a currency based on that, and we print all those coins and distribute those to the entire student body of the school, as well as the faculty and the parents too. When they see those values in action, they trade that coin, sort of pay it forward. There was a beautiful story of there was a group of students who were working in a group, and one of the students saw that there was a girl who was not included in the group, and one of the students said, "Hey, can you come on and join our group?" Another student had that empathy coin in her pocket. She reached out and gave it to that student for practicing some empathy in a group work assignment there. So that's how it manifests in real time in the classroom. We teach the hero's journey through coding and 3D design, and the hero's journey itself, what you see in Star Wars or Hunger Games or Frozen or whatever it is. That hero's journey involves many stumbles and falls, failures, pain, setbacks, and we're teaching kids to create themselves as protagonists in their games and in the artifacts they create in 3D, and bring those to life. Some other projects that we work on are during COVID, we came out with the Random Arts of Kindness project, because we were like, okay, this is a lot of screen time with kids. So how can we get kids creating actually physical art and bringing that out into the community to share with others, to inspire others? So the kids go out with chalk on the sidewalk, or they go out and hang flyers that they've created to inspire others. They plant rocks in the playground or places where they can to inspire and uplift each others during this particular time, where they might just be able to go out with themselves or caregiver with the art that they've made in our program. And we recognize accomplishments and celebrate those with badges. They used to be button badges, then they turned into 1-inch stickers, and now they're digital badges during COVID anyway. And the kids are earning those online as they accomplish not only coding and 3D design skills, engineering design skills. They also earned what we call meta badges, or soft skill badges for courage, it's risk taking, or giving feedback, gracious peer feedback, receiving that or giving that with a friend. They can earn that feedback friend. And then, at the pinnacle for us is, what are they doing with those skills to help transform their community and the world? So for those, they earned, say, the Changemaker badge here. And then along the way, what are they doing to protect that space for themselves, stand up for themselves, advocate for themselves personally and for others? And through the course of that, they earn badges like the Upstander badge. So we love social emotional learning, and are always constantly looking for ways to bring that more into a student-centered, project-based learning classroom environment, whether that is at home or back in the classroom as soon as possible, Lord willing. But I didn't go too long there.
Great. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Stephen. And sorry, next up, and I've just closed the window I was looking at with the order. My apologies. Next up is Karen.
I guess that's me.
Karen
Hey,
Clark.
everybody, good afternoon. So my company is Makeosity. So Stephen, it's a nod to the maker movement. I've been involved in making, I don't know, for 10 years now, I guess. I know Dale Doherty, I'm sure you do, done the Maker Fair gigs, et cetera, et cetera. I guess, I've always been a maker. I even, going back to being with my father and doing things with him in the garage back, eons ago, when he had the most interesting thing, which was a welding machine. And he had this humongous helmet that he would wear when it was an industrial welder, and the sparks were going everywhere. And I don't know, I used to like to pick that up, the helmet, and play with it and the other tools that he had laying around the garage. And I guess that was like my early, wow, it's like really fun to play with tools and create things. Or I'm even thinking about, I would like to take things apart and put them back together again and see if I could make them work after I took them apart. So yeah, it's been a big driving force in my life. And even with what I do with technology, so I haven't always been in the technology world, but I got into it back in, I think, 1994. So I'm old, and I've been around for a while. And when I first did, it was in the CD-ROM industry. I was actually, I have a business life too. I was doing some marketing before that, but I met some people who were thinking about starting a CD-ROM business, and I was kind of getting bored doing what I was doing in the marketing world, and said, oh, it's that. And that's how I started to get involved in working with programmers and really applying my love of making and creativity to exploring projects where we were, developing prototypes for titles way back then. And, as time progressed and technology progressed, I progressed with it. I'm always good at seeing trends and sort of remaking myself or remaking my interest, just because it keeps things really interesting for me, and just go with the flow. And when things started to move from CD-ROM to online, I got involved in different ways of exploring that. One of them was through starting my own non-for-profit and taking what I knew about programming and CD-ROM development and thinking about how to transfer my knowledge to what could be done in schools. And I got my first chance to take what I knew to New York City schools after September 11th, when, and this is just going along the social emotional lines that Laura was asking about, when, you know, children were so upset with what happened in New York City and, oh, why did people attack us? And I thought, you know, this is a good chance to use what I know about technology and the emerging web to be able to connect children not only in New York City, but around the globe. And I already knew people who were doing that. To have conversations about how do we get what we need in our communities through nonviolent means. I've always been interested in that. And looking at the works of Gandhi and Martin Luther King and how they were able to change things in the world just by, you know, not picking up a gun, not doing what people did in Washington, D.C. last week, using your words. And, you know, I was really lucky. I knew the founder of ePEL's Global Classroom, Tim DeCipio, way back then, and just these early people who were experimenting using the internet to create global e-learning spaces for children and teachers. And I had a friend who was the CIO of the Massachusetts Education Department, and they had developed a $20 million e-learning space for teachers. It was a technology where teachers could use it to collaborate to develop lesson plans, but they couldn't seem to get it off the ground. So, you know, I said to him, I have this idea that I want to create a community where children can talk about peace, sustainable development, all of these global issues that you have in the UN. And he said, why don't you use my technology? So I'm like, cool. So he helped me and other people who worked with me to customize this technology. And then I worked with Tim DeCipio at ePELs to start to invite teachers and children from classrooms all around the globe to get into this conversation, and start to write about and create artwork about how do we get what we need in more of a UN fashion. So
Karen, can you?
Everything to, yep, sorry.
I was just going to say, can particularly on that question of sort of engaging children making artwork, is that something that you all are doing now during the pandemic?
Yeah, I'll tell you about a couple of other things. I'll try and make it snappy. But so what we did is, so you can see there's some of the artwork here. They were able to upload that online through the system that Tom created. And then we actually printed this out as books and distributed to every classroom around the globe who contributed, including, sorry, I'm a little froggy, Armenia and Azerbaijan, which I think is interesting because back then they had a conflict they had just ended a conflict, and the children were negotiating ways to be able to talk about that without bashing each other through their teachers and our project. You know, and they're sort of back at it these days. But so no, we're not doing artwork right now. I'm always exploring ways for children to think about ways to express themselves, though, through technology. During the summertime, I worked on another just pilot project where I had children doing, working with different kinds of musical apps like GarageBand to create songs and raps about what was going on with Black Lives Matter. And that's a website that you can look at called Beats to Cure. So that was on the musical side. And I was looking at that because of a project that Laura and I've been working on. It's an engineering project. She mentioned it before, and Miss Jackson did too, called Make Everything Possible. That's an engineering project. Right now what we're doing is we're bringing electrical engineering to students in elementary and middle school. Online, we ship all the materials to schools, and they distribute backpacks of those materials to the children in their homes, and or they use them in classrooms. And we have coaches, most of them come from Laura, but Ms. Jackson's one of the coaches too, started as a parent in our program years ago. And she progressed to the point where she works for my company now, and I pay her, and she's a coach, and she coaches in all these classrooms. I had been looking at music, and musical engineering is another component of our program to go beyond robotics and electrical engineering.
Okay, I'm just going to jump in, Karen, for 2 seconds to say that I'm going to put the Make Everything Possible website on the Q&A, and to ask if you could think about specific things that you could tell parents or teachers right now to help them at home.
All right, well, here's what I can tell you.
Okay.
That, you know, this program, the program that we started was, you know, goes back 6 years ago, and it was to get parents more involved in STEM education, and to, especially in communities where parents and maybe even the schools and the children didn't have access to STEM education. So that started on site in classrooms, but when the pandemic hit, we took everything online. You know, it was pretty easy to do that. And the goal was to get parents involved, and that was why we were training coaches like Ms. Jackson. But what's really cool about, you know, the pandemic's horrible, what has been wonderful for our program is that we see so many parents at home with their children, and they're helping them to work on these projects together. And, you know, Ms. Jackson mentioned that there's a lot of satisfaction that the children feel when they are sitting side by side with their parents, and their parents are learning about STEM education, and they're able to talk to them about these electrical components. Well, like, for example, a multimeter. When the parents can learn how to use a multimeter and use it to measure voltage, and they can do that with their children at home, and they understand how to do it when they never saw that tool before. So, you know, they're learning together, they're learning about different pathways through the coaches. So many of the people that we work with are electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, and they're able to talk to the parents and the children about career pathways that they might be able to explore. I have like so many different thoughts because, you know, Ms. Jackson talked about it too. We have children who come to Super Power Hour on Friday, and they're so excited to be there because they meet kids from all over New York City schools who come to Super Power Hour. They get to make new friends. They are children who are interested in making in STEM, and maybe they don't get that kind of experience in New York City public schools on site, but they can do that when they come and they hang out with us. But
So,
you know, it's not just about engineering.
I'm going to jump in one more time just to say that anybody who is on this webinar who would like to see a Super Power Hour, to see how we're running a program like this, email me and I'll put my email up and we'll arrange it. We can't have 40 people at once, but you know, it's an example. I think one of the things that Karen is talking about or talking around is that they have the choice. They have the choice about Super Power Hour. And I think that in all aspects of life, we need to continue to work on giving kids choices, because all of our choices are reduced now. And so it's even more important than before. So.
Yes, yeah, right, choice. And when they come to Super Power Hour, this is something that we're exploring a little bit more with the breakout rooms, that they can go into breakout rooms and they can pursue different projects with us, because there's so many of us who are there that we're able to break out in smaller groups and do that. But, you know, mostly I would say that, you know, I heard people talking about crickets. We don't have crickets. We have mostly children who are very excited and engaged. And I think what's different with us and with other classrooms is that, you know, I don't think that there's a high pressure kind of classroom environment that we have. It's more like, here we are, we're exploring these things, we're having a lot of fun together. The children laugh, we tell jokes, they like that we tell jokes. We don't tell children be quiet. You know, sometimes you hear that in classrooms where kids get a little rowdy and the teachers are trying to tamp it down a little bit. It's not like that. I don't know, it's just, the program's been going really well. We have a lot of traction in New York City now. The parents love it. We get lots of great feedback from them. There's some children who struggle with making things on their own if their parents aren't there, but we have breakout rooms and we help them as much as we can. And I think struggle is good. I think sometimes New York City classrooms feed children the answers too much, or they're helping the children too much. Struggle is a good thing. Too much struggle can be frustrating, but we try to balance it. And I'm going to stop talking because there's so many people.
Thank you so
Very
much.
good. Thank you. Thank you, Karen. All right, Peter from Nori.
Hello, everyone. My name is Peter from Nori. I love this conversation. The SEL, the social emotional learning, is the reason that we founded Nori. And people say STEM is 21st century skills, and we say social emotional skills are the 21st century skills. Here's why. We started Nori not because we wanted to teach STEM, because one day, me and my co-founder, we sat down and we started to brainstorm what are the skills that the children of next generation would need to live a purposeful life. And then we did brainstorming, and then the 3 skills that remained unchanged were resilience, inquisitiveness, and empathy. So we wanted to build a program that helps children to develop those 3 soft skills. And then we realized that STEM is a very effective vehicle to achieve that. So that's why this whole conversation is like heaven. I can talk it forever, but I'll try to make my section as short as possible, but effective in sharing what we have learned and how to use STEM to help children to develop those soft skills. Early days, of course, we had so much temptation to make a cool looking project that doesn't really achieve soft skill development. On our website, it says we have this great mission, but looking into actual program, children were just following step by step the instructions and making something that would impress their parents. So we came a long way to develop a systematic way to achieve our mission, which is to, again, develop resilience, inquisitiveness, and empathy through STEM. And this is how we did it. We are using these 3 specific metrics to assess our program every time. 1, does it motivate children so each student knows exactly why they are learning? And almost every time we're using empathy for our motivation. That's number 1. Number 2, does it empower children such that they can be autonomous in building their prototypes, which invites them to make awesome mistakes and use their resilience to get to their prototypes. Number 3, does this class allow children to lead the class instead of the teacher giving step-by-step instructions? So children can use their, exercise their inquisitiveness to lead the class. And I want to elaborate a little bit more on the first point, which is about empathy. We use empathy as the biggest motivation for every project that we build. We believe every human being is by nature empathetic. When our children see a poor puppy on their TV, they go, oh, look at that puppy, I want to help them. That empathy, the way we use that empathy is we use immersive story. By the way, we teach age 3 to 12. So we work with younger children, early childhood children a lot. So we use immersive story that has specific issues and challenges that children can empathize with.
Peter, I'm just going to jump in for 2 seconds and remind you, as well as all of our panelists, that we really want to hear about ideas and suggestions that you have for our parents and for our teachers. We're thrilled to hear about Nori, but we all want to share and support our parents.
Yes, thank you so much for the reminder.
Sure.
So let's use an example then. So you want your children to learn about the circuit. So there's you can either tell your children, hey, here's a circuit. You make a closed circuit. Now it'll light up this light bulb. There's one way to do. Another way to do is then the children just learn without knowing why they're learning. Another way to learn is make a story that has a character who's lost in darkness. And you need to help these people. And in order for you to help this person, you need to build a flashlight. Now, how will you make a flashlight? And allow children to be the initiator of learning. Then they know exactly why they're learning, why they want to learn, how to put together a closed circuit, how to design the mechanical part so that it's easy for the person to hold it in darkness, and so on. So using this story, immersive story, can allow parents and teachers to use empathy as a strong motivation for children's learning.
Thank you.
Great.
And it's interesting that Stephen also talked about the empathy coin when he was talking about the sort of tangibles, the exchange of tangibles in the class. That seems to be an emotion that comes up over and over again as a motivator for children. Kim, can we hear from you?
Hi, my name is Kim. I'm from a company called Learning Beautiful. We make hands-on toys or educational materials, if you'll name them that teach kids about the foundations of computer science, computational thinking, and STEM concepts, but they do so in all hands-on, no tech, no digital components, no computers. So they are things like all natural materials. And so when I think back about this year, I think it's exciting to be here with all of you, and I'm grateful, and I realize that we wouldn't have had the same kind of moment a year ago. And we all work with children all the time, and seeing how exciting it is to watch a child learn something new and the process that they have and kind of that gift of encountering new things. And I just when I look back at this year, I feel like we're all going through something like that, and we've all learned so much. And when things have been really terrible and really dark, I think now is a really amazing time to reflect on those things, about what we carry forward with us. And quite specifically, I think for our learnings here personally and with the company, it's, what's successful is really a lot of this social emotional learning, which isn't necessarily a separate category. It's, treating ourselves and our children as one whole being that has to encompass all of these things that we're feeling and being able to name them. Something that we started doing that I want to share with everyone out there that could be a useful resource is we started making these free activities. They're called Learning at Home. They're on our website. It's just learningbeautiful.com, and you'll find them. But the idea here was trying to, again, take those ideas of what it means to learn through using your hands and trying to break down all these different barriers. And we have subjects where we say something is math or science or engineering or art. And, personally, my background is art, and I came to science. And I think one of the things we wanted to do was try and open up the spaces of learning. And I think about this in the context of the pandemic, where, for parents and educators out there who are thinking, I don't know much about STEM, but you do. It's trying to simplify and reflect on these small moments where you're focusing on something like building or making or observing or inquiry, and really trying to meet the child in that context. So I think that has been an incredible learning for us, to realize that we all just want to slow down and simplify and think about what really matters. And I often think about this whole process of making these quick exercises as almost being a metaphor for how we're learning. And it's really trying to get to what's essential, and that's learning together with our children. It's being open and acknowledging where we're at, but also really focusing on quality engagement. I think you're mute, Clay.
So I am, my apologies. I just wanted to ask, you talked about both slowing down and about quick exercises. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how those two speeds interact. If you were advising parents how to think about the sort of quick, small stuff and the slowing down at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, I think about that a lot. I think about that in my art practice. I think about it when I'm working with children. You know, lately I've been thinking about it with plants, oddly enough. You know, like when we have to think about things that change over a long period of time, and we have to engage with things in an amount of patience. But we know too that a lot of us who own businesses have had to work very iteratively, and we've had to adapt. And adapting is about being able to move a little bit quicker and being a little bit more flexible. So it's trying to hold space for that kind of agility and flexibility while you're also kind of thinking of the longevity of what we're in, because we realized very early on that this was a longer process and we did have to slow down and think through things, but we also had to speed up and become more resilient. And one of the things that's been an amazing learning for me personally and for people I interact with is that we are capable of doing that.
Great. Thank you.
I just want to jump in before we go on to say it's a rare moment that we have absolutely no questions, and we have an amazing panel of people with amazing experience. So Kim, thank you so much. And as Clay moves things on, I believe it's Ashley's turn. For those of you who are watching, don't hesitate, start asking us questions. Or we'll invent them if you don't, but
Right.
Just thought I'd say that.
Indeed. I have lots already.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, Ashley, over to you.
Hi, thanks. I'm Ashley Jane Lewis. I'm really excited to be here. I've been listening to all of these panels so that I can work with Laura to close out the session at the end of the day. I'm really excited to talk about some of the wisdom that's come out of the day.
Yes.
So on this panel for this topic, I just wanted to talk a little bit about a session that colleagues of mine have been running for the last few months. So I'm a new media artist and a creative technologist and an educator. And as many of you teach all kinds of different things that are typically taught in person with hands-on learning. And so when the pandemic hit, it became very clear that, of course, this particular subject, teaching electronics, Arduino circuitry, had to pivot to a new model. And I think those of you who are listening to this and hearing it as a familiar issue, I think could feel like, even just remembering it, I feel like I'm sweating just remembering that moment in the pandemic where you're looking down the pipeline of the fall semester. So in the summer, a collection of universities came together to decide how to move forward. So bear with me because there's a lot of us. So I'm going to name them so that everybody is credited. But a collection of people from OCAD University, ITP and IMA from NYU, Sheridan College, and Ryerson University. And so the incredible educators as a part of that, myself, Tess Sutherland, Tom Igo, Steve Daniels, Emily Green, David Bouchard, Kate Hartman, Doug Witten, Simone Jones, and Yessel Song. So we came together to decide how to go from here. And so in that community, there were many opportunities to have conversations around what kind of framework should you use. Did people buy cameras? Steve was like, I'm going to buy a green screen so I can show different kinds of angles and different kinds of opportunities to view my desk. And together in that community over the summer, these educators, we came up with a couple of different things as strategies to move forward with in the fall. So prepped, put all of our heads together, decided that the thing we could do to help the students the most is to create an opportunity for them to gather. So we invented this thing called Nerd Night International. It happened every Tuesday in the evening, and students from 4 of these different schools could gather to get extra help, learn how to debug their circuits, share the work that they had been doing, but most importantly, feel like they were supported in the curriculum that we had all designed. So the surprise to us all was that about a month in, it was super clear that the students who were coming to these sessions were not actually there for extra help. They weren't there for debugging their circuits or getting information to advance their code. And you know, the people who were there as educators, these are people that are in their textbooks. So you would think that that's what they were there for. They were really there for community. And I think it was a really nice reminder about the pressure of the moment and what we really need, and actually why we're probably drawn to these to this field, to this discipline. It was a nice reminder for us as educators that one of the early things that was compelling about the world of electronic arts was that you do it in person. You do it in person, you do it in labs, in maker spaces, you know, you do it in community, and you learn from one another. You know, a lot of us are holding degrees in these subject matters, but also have learned in a do-it-yourself way things that have existed outside of that academic curriculum that we had when we were students. And so I think when we were preparing in the summer, that was a really easy thing to forget. We're like, oh, what they need is like, how are we going to show them which way to plug their resistor in when we're all remote and the resistor is like this many millimeters big. But really, we ourselves had to pivot our model for Nerd Night International to prioritize community and letting students feel connected to one another. And so, you know, every time in our Nerd Night International sessions, we were like, okay, so there's a breakout room open if you need help with coding and if you need help with circuitry, or you could hang out here and just continue to talk. Nobody went to the breakout rooms. Everybody just wanted to talk. Everybody wanted to say, hey, look at this thing that I made. It's really cool, right? Or, hey, like I saw on Instagram, you posted this cool thing that you made. That's really great. It was like completely outside of what we were expecting. So we kind of had to like toss out a lot of the assumptions we had made and really just like, you know, elbow out more room for people to just be together. And I think there are two communities that I believe are really meaningful in this anecdote, in this story. Of course, the student community together across different schools with the same kind of passion. I think that's really interesting and really meaningful to consider as a teacher, or as a parent, that building an emotional like learning and social interaction also means that like friendship and sharing still maintains to be a large part of that. I think that the opportunity to feel like you share an interest with someone right now is really hard. A lot of the times where we're discovering that we share interests, it's usually in an in-person setting. So it's actually like an incredible win to make people who are sitting in two separate spaces, sometimes across borders, feel like they are connected and developing relationships that let each other feel seen. The other community that I think is important to note is the one that we as educators formed over the summer. So I really would love to encourage teachers to consider where you're finding resilience. Like, are you gathering in clusters of educators? Are you feeling like you are able to talk about your vulnerabilities in community? That is such a fortifying experience. And, you know, we're doing it in this conference today too, but, you know, as we're creating services and opportunities for students to feel more palpably connected to the learning experiences that we're drawing, we also have to think about how we can be in communities so that we can keep ourselves fortified, so that we can continue to create great opportunities for them. So that was the big revelation that we had in Nerd Night International. And I think it's really something that I'll keep ruminating on as the pandemic unfolds, and certainly post-pandemic, just really reminding myself, wow, community over everything. Community makes a stronger education opportunity. Community makes stronger outputs of projects. Community makes more resilient, emotional students. You know, so I think that's maybe where I'll leave it until the discussion.
Excellent. Clay, you're muted.
My apologies. I was just saying thank you, and I think we're at the discussion. I'm going to use moderator privilege to ask the first question, coming Ashley off what you were just talking about. I'm struck by the fact that K through 12 educators teaching in person have historically had exactly the opposite problem of the one you just detailed, which is there's so much social life you get for free by drawing people together that there's a lot of, am I going to have to separate you two, right? That there's, you know, that we're used to a world in which there's the socializing overwhelms the learning. Now we're in a world where social life is so desiccated, it threatens to just drain the life out of what would otherwise just be dry facts and without empathy, as Peter and Stephen were talking about. So I want to ask all of you, where there are groups of children and where you were thinking about them motivating or engaging with each other, what have you done online to get those groups to engage with each other, completely separate from trying to convey information or techniques or goal-oriented stuff? How have you created, or how have you seen it work, that children get this kind of engagement in online and in a distributed environment?
Clay, I'll give it a shot.
Great, thanks, Stephen.
And that's really challenging.
Yeah.
And I want whatever we say to be applicable to parents at home. I think in the context of our online classes, we're, one of the things that we do is create breakouts and pair up students with some type of feedback question that they can share their projects with each other, and then just share one aspect of how that project works, or what they, we use simple protocols like one thing I wonder if, or one thing I really liked about your project, one thing I wonder if, that kind of thing, to get them giving each other feedback. I think the main sort of driving dynamic for us is to kind of displace that teacher to student poll and replace that with student to student polls of learning. So the more we get them talking, the more they can exercise that muscle of getting feedback from each other, which is, by the way, what every Fortune 500 or startup company alike is looking for coming out of K-16 that they're not getting.
Right. Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that. I 100% agree with Stephen, because last summer we ran both in-person and virtual summer camps. And surprisingly, we found the virtual summer camp even more effective in community building among children than in person. Children were already 6 feet apart in person. So when we try to have a presentation or feedback loop, they were having a hard time hearing each other. But virtual program, they were just one screen away. It just makes this communication very effective. And as long as we use the breakout rooms to make this feedback, the interaction loop quicker, then it is a great platform to allow children to share their idea. And Stephen just gave a great example of moving this to this, like, among the peers. And I found Zoom class, as long as teachers know how to ask the questions and how often ask questions and how to utilize the breakout rooms effectively, that was achieved surprisingly well via a virtual program.
Interesting. Great, thank you. And then Bakhtiar in the QA asked a question that I think has come up as a theme throughout this, with questions of paper engineering and engagement with sort of computer science ideas with non-digital tools. He says, do you see online learning digital tools being privileged by educators disproportionately over traditional non-digital tools and resources like the ones we've been looking at today? And if you see people leaning much more into purely digital versus a mix of digital and physical, why do you think that is? Is that a problem? How might you respond to that?
I might give that a shot again, just real quick. And I might say Godwin Morris of Dazzling Discoveries will have a lot to say about that and how she's doing that very effectively online. I do think that we are sliding a bit towards online with Scratch and Tinkercad and that kind of thing, because it's easier to share screen on that kind of thing as opposed to getting a webcam on a physical project. But there are ways to do it, and maybe Godwin can. I mean, we're doing it in ways where the kids have to hold up their project in front of the camera. It's a little bit more challenging, but it can be done. And I might encourage Godwin to chime in there. But sorry, Karen, you were going to say something.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you're saying that, because I've worked with Tinkercad and we looked at doing, we looked at online apps or whatever. And even with my GarageBand experience, it was more difficult for us to be able to see what the children were doing without them having two screens. So, you have one computer or one iPad to be able to look into Zoom and have that classroom experience. But for a lot of these apps, you need another device for the children to be able to use that at the same time. And then somehow you have to be able to connect with that. So the coaches and I have been thinking about different ways to be able to do that if we were going to do mechatronics, for example, with Arduino and programming. But it's been really simple for us to do the non-digital things where we're sending switches and coin batteries and motors and you know, you name it, the plethora of things that you would do to build different kinds of projects. And we use a simple arm with a camera. So we go, you know, bird's eye down with the camera, and then the children are able to watch us as we're using our hands and building things. So they can build with us in that way. And yeah, there's some of this too where you have to lift up something to the camera. But you know, I have to say we've been doing it pretty well. And if anybody wants to know how to do that, you know, we could have another conference just on how to make things with children. And I did one thing for anybody who's interested. I posted our URL for Make Everything Possible. And there's a digital comic book there. That's an original creation of us. And, you know, back when Laura and all of us were sitting down and thinking about it, she said, how do we make this like a klutz book where there's something interactive about it? So there are lots of things in that comic book that parents can do with children. So there's the parent-child thing that you were asking about, Laura. They can go grab that for free and do things with their kids. They just need to pick up some of the supplies.
Great, thank you. And Kim, it sounds like you all committed to non-digital as a philosophical question well before the pandemic. How has that transition worked during the pandemic?
Yeah, we did. And I will say we work with children starting around age 3, typically up to 9. And so a lot of what we had been focused on was just trying to create this opportunity to allow children to learn in a hands-on way that aligns with some of their developmental goals, and to do so without having to have some kind of mediated experience with the screen that they may be having when they're older. Of course, this has been very interesting over the past year because a lot of parents, a lot of educators are very aware of just understanding that they have certain limitations right now to their learning, and a lot of parents are kind of concerned, and a lot of us are also just kind of tired of being on a computer, right? And so I think something that we had wanted to do was provide these resources that actually didn't, you know, you didn't really need anything. And so what has been a nice learning experience there is to realize that we don't need a lot of fancy things, and to be a little bit lighter with what we're doing. And a lot of these things that we think of as STEM concepts are really embedded in other things. And that's, you know, what I kind of was saying earlier, like, you know, making or tinkering or experimenting or cooperating, all these things that are actually really, really critical, and they don't have to be tied to any kind of specific thing. So, you know, and it's, the reality is we're all having to adapt and do what we can digitally, but any opportunity that we can take some of these concepts and allow for other opportunities and other learning with hands, or even for parents to have that kind of engagement, that's what we've been focusing on.
Great.
I really like what you just said, Kim, and it reminds me a lot of how solutions to some of these things can also come from the students and the children themselves. So, for instance, I'll tell an anecdote on behalf of a collaborator inside of Nerd Night. So all of us teach electronic arts. So it's very hard to move to a digital world when like the objective is circuits and wires and resistors. That's the whole premise. And so, you know, there were many weeks of like, hold up this hairy circuit to the camera and try to decipher things. One of the collaborators in Nerd Night, Steve Daniels, loves to tell this story about how for weeks they had been having these classes and sessions where there was a lot of like a lot of mess involved in how to demonstrate what's wrong with your circuit. I said circus probably because it was so messy. Mm-hmm. I think the one of the wonderful things that came out of that was one particular Zoom call with a student who has a background, I believe, if memory serves, in handcraft and paper. And so in that Zoom call, just as Steve was asking the student to show him her circuit, she mounted this little origami paper structure to the camera and had made this tiny little structure that included a small mirror, like a tiny oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the word, but a little projector that allowed for the image in the camera to bounce off of the mirror so that she could show you exactly what was on her tabletop and position the circuit right below. And it became this like revelation, like, oh, why didn't we think of that? We could have provided like an origami drawing for people to create these little things. It's so brilliant. And I think it was a really nice opportunity to highlight her previous experience in making from a non-technological perspective, folding that into an opportunity that allows her to learn a skill that she hadn't acquired yet. It was just a really great hybrid of these two worlds that I think you're also speaking about too, Kim.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
A
Ashley.
periscope. Thank you, Tom. Periscope is the word I was looking for. Thanks, Tom.
And we've got one last question, which is one of those ones that could open into an entire panel just on its own, but about the kind of emotional chaos that everyone is in, faculty, teachers and students, but students especially because they're dealing with something that is, it's a world historical crisis, and they are not even yet at kind of, adult levels of self-management. Have you all found ways to take that, that emotional state of the students and actually help them think through or work through what's going on with them during the pandemic in the context of the tools and techniques and education you all are offering?
While you're all thinking about it, I'll jump in and just say that I have really encouraged my teachers to follow, I believe it was James in the first panel said, get rid of half the curriculum. And that part of our curriculum right now really has to be about supporting kids in life versus in the specific thing about circuitry or coding or animation or whatever. And that that's one way that we do handle that. We have an opening circle time, we just have to, and I think Kim's point about things are going slowly, some things are going slower and some things are going faster is super important in the classroom, because I feel as though we have to go slower often in the classroom. And even in my communication with my own son, who is a college student, we're all a little in shock. And that means that the amount of our brain that absorbs information is reduced. And so so my solution to the question of the emotional chaos is to give it time in the classroom and to verbalize things that are kind of difficult to verbalize and to talk about them. So it might sound a little like group therapy, and in a way it kind of is, but in safe ways.
And I posted a link to my summer pilot project, Beats to Cure, because it speaks to the question that you were asking about helping children to make sense of things that were going on. So, not only were they talking about Black Lives Matter and we discussing that and they writing music and beats to it, but they were also working around issues of the pandemic. So, I've just found, going back to Peace Diaries too, that the internet could be so powerful to be able to connect communities and especially children to have opportunities to have discussions on various topics with each other and with adults that they feel comfortable and safe with.
Comfortable and safe. I think those are the key words.
And Peter?
And also, we can flip the coin and to use this as an opportunity for children to be fully empathetic towards others too. So they've seen so much pain in other people and the society. And although they're young, they feel that too. And this is a great opportunity for us to open up topics to make children to think about what it means to be in others' shoes and what they can do to help others. And it opened up so many topics to help children to develop empathy-driven projects through this program.
Great.
And with that, I think we're at the end of time. So Laura, let me thank our panelists, and Laura, let me turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you. I am going to bring in the new panelists, and at the same time, those of you who are here, I'm going to have you end being on video. But I do want to add one comment if I can talk and do this at the same time. Probably not. I'll let Morelli, you go ahead and do what you're doing, which is that I had a son who had multiple surgeries growing up, like very big ones on severe clubbed feet, one at 11, infant ones, but one at 11, one at 12, and one at 16. And, you know, we always think at this time they're missing so much and they have to catch up. But I think it's really important for everyone to know that they're learning a lot from what's going on right now. And this is the curriculum. And that's okay. It's a very different curriculum. And it's a very good curriculum. So I think that kids are going to be fine. And this is their curriculum right now. And I'm going to bring everyone in who is on the next panel. I believe I'm asking people to start video. Yes, it is working. And it has to start video. And we are missing Carlos. Do I have Carlos? No. Okay. Okay, Carlos, where did you go? Morelli, can you find Carlos and bring him in as a speaker? Thought I had brought him in. Okay, I'm going to let Morelli solve that one and I'll start. First of all, it is wonderful to have our next panel. I am just great you're here. So excited about doing this. I'm sitting in my seat for 4 hours and I'm a person that jumps around and doesn't usually sit in one place for a long period of time. I'm super excited about every panel, but I crafted each one to have a really interesting mix of people, ideas, thoughts. And in this panel, we have someone who is a RoboFun curriculum creator and teacher. We have someone who runs an online company. That's Kelsey. Carlos is our teacher. We have Ella, who is my intern and a high school student who I recently did a Facebook Live with, and she was just so brilliantly articulate about what she's getting as a student and what she's not getting as a student. I was like, why am I doing this whole conference without kids in it? So at that point, I brought in Ella. I have Tess, who will tell us more about her work in Ontario and Toronto and Nerd Night, which I'm very excited to hear. And we have Jenny from Brooklyn Robot Foundry, who, similar to me, we're right there in the front line of pivoting quick. So what I'd like to do is, as we've done for all the other panels, is each of you has about 4 minutes to give us your thoughts. The topic of this panel is how did you modify curriculum to work well in a remote setting? But everyone who knows me knows I'm very nonlinear. And if you're like, I don't really want to talk about that, I have something better. But what I'd like to keep in mind is that this is all about helping parents at home and helping teachers. So we do want to hear what your organization is and what your organization does, but we really want to hear, if you're at home listening to this, what are 3 takeaways or 1 important takeaway? So think through that. And we will start with Carlos.
All right. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to take a moment and thank everyone who is joining us today. So my name is Carlos Pereira, as I'm sure you've realized, and I'm a biomedical engineer. I've been working with RoboFun for the past couple of years. I started as a robotics instructor and later moved into curriculum development. I was still in school when I discovered RoboFun, and it's been an incredibly transformative and a rewarding experience. It's actually given me a lot to think about in terms of my career goals and life goals in general. So I just wanted to start off by saying that this pandemic has been an interesting experience, to say the least, and that's me talking as, a human being. But more so as an educator. When we began to transition towards the remote learning environment, I was super excited and eager to finally break away from the monotony that came with those first few weeks of the isolation, as I'm sure a lot of us were. But a few months later, I found that, the challenges and the shortcomings that I'm sure we've all experienced and has been discussed today, it kind of started to chip away and eat at that enthusiasm that I had in the first place. So I experimented with a few different ideas. I talked to a few fellow educators who gave me some, tricks and tips that helped a lot in the remote learning environment. But what I found that was the most helpful thing in terms of both myself and in terms of the students' enjoyment in teaching was that what helped to alleviate most of that friction was just learning to let go. And I actually found it really interesting that I was listening in on the previous panel, that last point that you made, Laura, in terms of, you know, just letting go of the curriculum and that the pandemic is their curriculum, that was a very, it seems intuitive now, but it was a learning process to kind of realize that. Okay, let me move on. So a few months later, I was really
great points, though. Great points, Carlos. So.
Yeah, and it's a very simple idea, and I mean, the way that I thought about it was that in remote learning isn't the most important thing. What's more important is creating and fostering that sense of community, particularly when working with younger children who've been in isolation and are at a very crucial emotional and social developmental stage in their lives. Again, while that's simple and intuitive, it's easy to forget when, you know, despite your best efforts to, you know, provide adequate teaching, consider that we are in a remote learning environment. So you do start to scrap some of the, you know, harder to understand material that is not as easily achievable remotely. And you don't notice as much progress as you would like or expect. It can be very disheartening. And then what that does is it affects your emotional state, your emotional well-being, and then it affects your ability to be a good teacher. So, I mean, to put that, I guess, succinctly, I think that an increased amount of flexibility is crucial to teaching in the remote learning environment. And what I found was that when I began to let go of the goals that I had set for myself in terms of what I wished the students would walk out of a lesson with in terms of their understanding of the material, that it became a lot more rewarding both for myself and for the students. There's one particular lesson that came to mind. I was working with these two young boys. We were working with robotics. And at the end of the lesson, when it was time for us to say goodbye, I kept on trying to say goodbye, but they were there for 5 minutes just talking about their plans and what they wanted to do. And I thought that was great. And that's when it was like a lightning moment for me, where I realized that although I was trying to reach out to them and check in on them throughout the process, throughout the lesson, when we were working not independently, but when we were working on building the robots, I would ask these questions, but I realized that it wasn't as effective. And that was the approach that I would do in classrooms, where I did find it was effective because there is that face-to-face and you are interacting on a much more personal level. So to, I guess, build on that, what I found to be really effective was to devote a time that is solely intended to nurture and foster that sense of community, an open forum of sorts, where it's not only myself asking the students questions, I encourage them to ask myself questions, how I'm doing. And the way that I encourage that is by talking a little bit more about myself, being honest, obviously in an appropriate manner, but just letting them know about my interests and things that wouldn't normally come up if you're trying to get through a lesson plan. So I found that goes a long way in terms of their ability and willingness to retain this information. So I guess in short, what I'm trying to say is that it's important to realize that, although a curriculum may be edited and, shortened in an attempt to facilitate remote learning and achieve, realistic outcomes, oftentimes even after that has been considered, we won't be able to effectively cover all that material. And I think that that's okay. As you were saying, we're living in a very erratic time in history, and it's only natural that education reflects that. I think it's more important that we take care of young scholars' minds and continue to develop them in a way that gives them as close to the same emotional and social stimulation and satisfaction that they would get in a classroom, so that once this pandemic is over, they're able to hit, the academic side of things, full stride, and they will have come out much stronger having gone through this experience.
Thank you so much, Carlos. I want to encourage, we're about to hear from Kelsey and Matt from CodeJoy, and I want to encourage them, and then Carlos at the end. In our electrical engineering programs, they've been super helpful at helping us with multiple cameras, which really opened up huge, you can see my hands and my face, So I want to make sure that we cover that because
I
it
see.
could be helpful for parents at home to know that these options, and especially for teachers. So take it away, Kelsey and Matt.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having us. My name is Kelsey Derringer. I am one of the co-founders of CodeJoy. We are an online education company that teaches coding and robotics and engineering. And unlike most people here, we didn't pivot. This is what we always were. We wanted to be an online coding and robotics and engineering company. So we teach on Zoom, we teach on Google Meets, things like that. You can see, like, you know, from our website, we're video chatting with kids all over the world. We've worked with some really cool partners like the Berkeley Girls in Engineering summer camp, like UNICEF, like Boys and Girls Clubs. We've done lots of great and really fun activities, but we do that all from our studio here. So as we think about, you know, what are some big takeaways for you as parents and you as educators, I think our biggest takeaway, and the thing that we do really well and that we try to help other people do well too, is the thing you have to realize about online teaching is it's a visual medium. It doesn't matter how interesting I make my voice. It doesn't matter how great the video, the pre-recorded video that I'm going to show you is. It's a visual medium. And you have about 13 inches to engage your audience. And behind that 13 inches, there's a cat and a window and snacks. And like, you're competing with all of that, right? So if you want to get their attention on what you're asking them to do, you've got to communicate it visually. So we use multiple cameras here at our studio. We've got this great top-down camera. We've got another side camera over here. We use the techniques of filmmakers to the way that a director keeps your eyes on the screen. We use those same techniques to keep your brain on the robot or on the code, right? So for example, we might, I might be talking and making eye contact with the camera here, and then switch over here and like, let's talk about this code that we're building. Let's investigate. What does a tri-LED do? And what percentages are we going to talk about? Well, okay, so we see red, green, blue. What does that mean? Well, here are the component colors of light. And if we mix red and blue, what do you think you're going to get there? Right? It's a visual medium. That's how we communicate visually. So to that effect, you might see that we named ourselves Kelsey and Matt because it's not just me here alone. I also have my co-founder here, Matt the Robot. Hi, Matt the Robot.
Hey, Kelsey. How's it going today?
I'm good. Do you want to tell people why you're under a sink and you are a small cardboard robot?
Sure. So really, I mean, I'm off screen and I'm usually switching cameras and doing some tech stuff, which is why I'm not standing next to Kelsey right now. But my primary role is to take the comments that are coming into the class and bring them kind of into the show that we're sort of trying to create, just to elevate some of the comments that the kids are making.
That's right. So the other big tip that I'll make, and I don't have a piece of cardboard for this, but if I can say it forcefully enough, then you'll all take it into your hearts, is the job is the same. The job of teaching online is the same job, and the job is, what are kids doing? Not what are they listening to, not what are they supposed to know by the end of it. The job of teaching is creating educational experiences where kids do stuff, where they know something at the end of it that they didn't know before it. It's not that they listened to you and they heard something and now they know it in their souls. That's not how we learn things. We learn things by like burning our hands on hot glue. That's how you learn, right? So to that effect, creating visual experiences for kids and creating experiences for kids, we also use a lot of other visuals. So this is from a recent class. This one is called Robot Memories.
I'm just going to jump in for a minute,
sure.
Because I know all about what you, Kelsey and Matt, do, but I don't know that our audience does. And as much as this isn't about pitching every company, you got to give us a little context. And so give us context about what you do, because there's teachers out there that might go, oh, this could be a big help, or parents who want their schools to use your services. So
totally. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Laura. I didn't want to be too pitchy.
Right.
But yeah, so what we do is we create these classes where we have little, like, you know, sets like this little robot set right here. There's this little elderly robot named Dottie. Hi, are you doing all right today, Dottie? Yeah, she's doing all right. And then her grandson, Elby. Elby, are you doing okay today too? Yes. All right. Wonderful. That's so great. And what kids do during our classes is we teach them how to code, and then they use that code. So something like, we teach them how to code using something like MakeCode, or we have our own system as well that looks like MakeCode, where the code that the kids build, we put that on our robots. So we're located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but in real time, kids are learning coding concepts, changing the color of a tri-LED, moving a motor, and moving that stuff over there, right? Their code is controlling those little robots or the world around them in some way. So that's what we do. I mean, if you want to learn more about it, you can always visit our website, codejoyeducation.com. You can find us on Twitter. There's our Twitter handle, or you can also always email me, because we do these things for organizations. We actually don't usually go directly to families. We want all of the stuff that we do to be free for kids and parents. We work with school districts. So we'll do like a virtual field trip where your fourth period class, all 30 of you will come with us, and we'll be seeing each other's code, and I'll be like, all right, let's look at Carlos's code. Ooh, Carlos, I really like what you did with your percentages there. Hey, Jenny, oh, I really liked your angle. Let's figure out why Tessa's motor didn't move, right? Like that's what we do during it. And we can do that for your school, your after school, your pod. If you're in a learning pod, all your kids can kind of, bring a Chromebook, gather around and relate. But the two big takeaways of what we do at CodeJoy, which I think can really help teachers as you're thinking about how do I take this thing that was great in the classroom and make it great online, are, remember, it's a visual medium. You have to show them something to keep their attention on the screen. And the job is still the same. The job is create engaging experiences for kids. That could be in the chat, that could be in the code, that could be in the robot, that could be in the go grab 3 things around your house to start with the letter T and come back. Okay, what are they doing? They're running, they're grabbing tin cans, whatever that is. But it's still all about what are the kids doing. So thanks so much for having us, Laura. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much. Okay, Ella. Ella is a junior in high school. And obviously the question of how to modify curriculum, what Ella can talk to us about as the recipient of this is what's working, what's not working. And I've given Ella lots of permission to really tell us the things that aren't working, because as we know, there's a lot of things that aren't. And we do have one Q&A, and we're going to wait till the end to answer that, or unless you'd like to go ahead, Matt and Kelsey, go ahead and answer that. So Ella, take it away. How are you today?
I'm good. Hi.
Hi.
Happy to be here. Like Laura said, I'm an intern at RoboFun, and I am a junior at Millennium High School. I think the biggest, obviously this pandemic changed my entire life, as it did for all of us. I think that the biggest issue that I've been feeling is just that I'm genuinely not learning enough. I feel like I haven't been learning not even close to as much as I used to when we were in person. And I know that my teachers know that, and I'm sure that that is difficult to deal with, and I can't imagine what they're going through, but I think that it makes it so much harder to deal with this problem when communication between teachers and students is so limited and uncomfortable and just not really anything that we know how to deal with. A huge part of the cut of information that I've been receiving from school in general is just limited time. All of my classes are 30 minutes, which, it's two-sided because it's so hard to ask us to sit and stare at a screen for a really long time and stay engaged. But it also, how can you teach a class, especially online, in half an hour? And like has been mentioned, with this everything that's going on in our world, especially in high school, I think it's really important to talk about what we've been learning outside of the classroom and our feelings. And I think a lot of my teachers are doing a good job of taking time away from class to really go through some deep things that me and my fellow classmates have been feeling. But we also like I said, have such limited time. And I think that balance is just, it's putting a lot of stress on all of us. And as a junior, I'm starting to apply to college, and, you know, I wish that we could just really take a break sometimes and shift our academic focus, but also I do need to learn these things, and when I'm thrown back into the real world, it's going to be difficult to make that transition if I have lost as much as I have been losing.
Do you have maybe like a couple of suggestions for your teachers or for your school administration that would make things better? And then when you're done with that, if you could just address the social part of it all for you.
So I can't speak a lot about this because it hasn't officially started yet, but my school has started, what did they call it? Like MHS chat, Millennium High School. And it's pretty much where you sign up to speak with your teachers for 7 minutes, and it's like it's just like a conference to check in, and teachers can request to talk to students, and students can sign up to talk with teachers. And I'm hoping that this will kind of open up an opportunity to really get to know our teachers on an individual level and just like develop a relationship. I think that is a good idea. My one concern is that we are teenagers, and taking time to talk to your teacher is not necessarily something that everyone wants to do. And I'm trying to push myself to do it and to talk to my teachers about writing college recommendations and things like that. But I know that that's not going to be true for everyone, and I hope that the teachers reaching out to the students for these meetings will really start to create an environment where we're communicating constantly. About the social part, a huge issue in school in general is having your camera on. I know that my teachers spend a lot of time talking about, please turn your camera on. It is so hard to teach to a blank screen, and I think, I mean, I can imagine that it is. I think
Ella, before you go any further, how many kids are in a class at a time?
in my classes, there are usually like 35 kids.
Okay.
In some classes, 20 cameras are on. In some classes, 6 cameras are on. It really varies. I think a lot of it has to do with how close the students feel with the teachers, and how relatable they think they have been during online learning. I feel like some classes are clearly, students are more engaged and they want to have their cameras on and they want to be participating. So that part of the social aspect, I think, affects student-to-student relationships and student-to-teacher relationships. I know that because this started at the beginning of the year, I don't really know the kids in my class, and so sometimes that makes it hard to speak to the whole class and turn my camera on and be participating, because I never got the chance to meet these people in person, and I really don't know anything about them. I also
have one other question. Have any of your teachers spent time on this? Like going around and saying, hey, Ella, take a few minutes and tell us about yourself.
Not really.
Okay.
I think that my teachers are overwhelmed with how much they need to get to us information-wise, and it means that we don't have time to kind of figure out how this all works socially online. Mm-hmm. I think that there's also some weird high school kind of like social norms that are being developed about like who turns their camera on and who doesn't, and like no one, my teachers and my peers actually aren't really talking about that, but I feel like it's very, we are very social beings and we're adjusting to like whatever that means in the moment as teenagers. And I think that like sometimes it's just embarrassing to be the person that turns your camera on first, or like, which is true in school too. I think like, you know, if you participate too much, you kind of get that reputation, and it's uncomfortable. And I think that applies to online learning now too. And I think the last thing with cameras is just that, like, it kind of puts so much responsibility on us, because we have so much power to completely disengage from our classes by just turning off our camera. And we can go and think and look and do whatever else we want. And that can never happen in a classroom. I mean, I think it's different in college, but our teachers are paying attention to us, and they're asking us, you know, they're cold calling you and saying, hey, you're clearly not paying attention. What, can you answer this question? Or can you have another student explain this to you? Because I really don't think that you're listening. And like, just to have so much responsibility as a student to be able to, it's just so easy to not pay attention. And I think that that's really something that I've been struggling with, and my peers too, my friends. It's really hard when you have so much power. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to share?
I think one thing that I've been trying to do trying to be an active part of my community is thinking about how to make things better and make it easier for us to learn. And I was kind of hoping that my teachers would take this as an opportunity to limit testing and turn more towards project-based grading, or however you want to, I don't know, just have more projects and encourage collaborative learning, especially now that we don't get to talk to each other. And I just feel like that's kind of been missing, and I know that my school has the ability to do that, and I know it's a lot of work for the teachers, and I am not saying that this is an easy task, but I just wish that, like, there was some recognition that we aren't learning as much as we were before, and having accumulative tests that really collect information across a month of learning about one unit isn't realistic anymore. And encouraging us to do projects and talk to our peers even through Zoom, or get their number and really like talk stuff out together, because we don't get to do that. We're just sitting alone in our rooms. And I wish that there was just more of that, and less trying to stick to the way it was before and have like pop quizzes, and that's not really an accurate way to show what we've been learning now.
So if I could put words in your mouth and correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is they're basically saying, okay, we're doing the exact same thing, I'm just teaching to a screen versus teaching in a classroom. So you don't see that there's been a lot of modification.
Yeah, a little bit. Yes, that is what I'm saying. I think it varies from class to class, and I know that, some, like a math class, we probably should have quizzes, and I think that there's more, I don't know, well, maybe that's not even true, but but I think that, yes, it just feels like there could be a lot more change, and I think that it seems like teachers haven't really had, we still had to have school, so there wasn't time to just stop everything we're doing and plan this all out and create something new, but yes.
Are your teachers utilizing breakout rooms at all?
Breakout rooms are hard. I think that it's hard on the students because it's really uncomfortable. I know that I've been in a breakout room and unmuted myself and asked a question and just got no response, absolutely nothing. And I think that teachers know that, and at some point, because we have such limited time, I've talked to my teachers about this before, that it doesn't feel worth it to send you for 5 minutes into a breakout room when I know that you could be getting information from me if I'm talking to the whole class versus you just sitting there silently for 5 minutes. So, yeah.
All right. Ella, this has been very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are ready to hear from Tess Sutherland, who will talk to us about Nerd Night International. And all of her work at Ryerson University, I believe, is university or college. Take it away, Tess. You're
Thanks, Laura.
okay.
Yeah, so I'm Tess. Just to speak first to my credentials as an online educator, I've actually been doing this for years. In addition to my work at Ryerson University, I work at the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And so we do remote learning there all the time. So I've been doing remote programming over Zoom for the past I think 4 years now. And the work I do at the Royal Ontario Museum, I think, is really resonant to the conversation we're having today, because it's really empathy and social justice focused. So that program is digital education for kids all across Ontario. And it has this particular focus on respectful learning and sharing of Indigenous knowledges and experiences, which is, you know, really important and really exciting to bring that into digital education spaces. So I've been doing that for a long time, but this year I've been working at Ryerson for several years, but this year obviously we're online, and I'll keep it brief because I'm eager to get to the Q&A, and Ashley Lewis already spoke about it in a previous panel, but I'm here specifically about the work we've done with an initiative we call Nerd Night International, which is a partnership between Ryerson University, OCAD University, Sheridan College, and NYU, particularly the ITP program and IMA programs there. And on that program, we've had just an incredible number of brilliant educators and people working on it, particularly, as I mentioned, Ashley Lewis and Emily Green have been kind of the leads on this. And then also Kate Hartman, Simone Jones, Steve Daniels, Tam Igo, Yisul Song, and Doug Whitten. So all of those wonderful people have all been pouring their resources and joy into this wild experiment. But basically what Nerd Night International is we meet weekly with students from all of these institutions to share work, share what we're working on, and also just create community. And Ashley spoke really eloquently on this earlier. We thought that this was going to be a space for us to offer help to students, but instead it became a space for students to offer community and love and joy to each other. And that's what's become really, I think, essential and special in this moment. A couple of things, a couple of really key takeaways, I think, in addition to the community element is, as many people have echoed throughout the day, you need to start with empathy. You should always start with empathy in teaching, as all the educators here know. But particularly in this moment, begin with empathy in everything you do. All of your programming, all of your events and activities should start in an empathy-focused way, in this way that makes safety and space for everybody to engage. So an example of what we do at Nerd Night is, in addition to the event, we also have a Discord server, which runs 24/7. For those who don't know what Discord is, it's like a chat, video, text platform. And so that space is available 24/7 to create community for students, but we always wanted that to be a really safe and secure community. And so when students join that community, they have to agree to community rules of play that we wrote with a collaboration of a ton of different people, a ton of different stakeholders, so that they're really thoughtful about how we ask students to engage with one another online. Because though lots of our students come with connections to one another already, lots of them don't. And either way, the online space is a completely different world than the world we're used to operating in. And so you have to focus first on that safety and empathy in order to build a community that can be sustainable and prosperous online. And the other quick thing I'll mention as a really key takeaway is a thing that I think has been so important and so evident to us is do what you can't. And what I mean by that is do what you can't normally do. The pandemic, I think, has obviously been a massive challenge for all of us in terms of our teaching and for students in the way that they learn, for parents in the way that their households operate while they work and their students go to school. But I think when you can, try and see it as an opportunity to do the things you could have never done before. So Nerd Night International is an incredible example of that. It's for universities, but it's also students around the world. We have students on I think, every continent except Antarctica. We have students in basically every time zone that are joining us real time or asynchronously. And this is a thing we never could have done. We never would have had the time, space, or capacity to do this in our regular affairs. Another thing we do is we do these events called Get Goods, which are student-led workshops, and we get our university students to teach each other something that they're really great at. And it doesn't have to be at all curriculum related. It helps bring our students bring, you know, some of their joy and excitement back into the classroom. But they run these workshops, and we often do them as a lead-in to the Nerd Night event. And the best workshops we've had have been things that we never could have done on campus. So lots of like cooking and baking. We've got one coming up this term where a student is going to teach other students how to fold clothes, because she's worked in retail forever, and people are always asking her how she folds her clothes so nicely. So all these things that we never could have done before, we're trying to be really excited and passionate and forward thinking that we have this opportunity right now. So let's use it. So yeah, I'm excited to have the Q&A, but I'll pass it back to you, Laura.
All right. Thank you so much, Tess. My joy in doing this, I feel like it's been so exciting, and I've made a lot of friends, and I really hope when this is all over, we can all meet and come together. But in the meantime, I'm thrilled that we're able to give our parents and our teachers a lot of advice. So Jenny from Brooklyn Robot Foundry, the founder of Brooklyn Robot Foundry.
Hi, thank you. Okay, so I'm Jenny. I'm the owner of Brooklyn Robot Foundry. We teach hands-on robot building classes to kids, so we're a little more material focused than I think some of the other businesses. We've been in business for 10 years, and so up until March, we had 4 physical locations within New York City, where kids would come and they would build things. And then we also have a design and manufacturing facility in Brooklyn. So we create all of our own designs, and we really focus on kind of the fun of the build more so than the final polished product. We're really focusing on the process. And basically, if a kid walks away from our class and they feel like they understand how something works, and if they feel empowered to try on their own, and if they feel okay to fail, then that's it. We've made it. We've kind of met our mission. So we start at age 2 and we go all the way up to adults. But our core classes are for 5 to 9-year-olds, and we really focus more on electromechanical. I went to, my father's an engineer, my grandfather's an engineer. I grew up in Ohio building stuff in a garage, and I went to school for mechanical engineering. So that's kind of like the core of what we do. But we also use the Hummingbird platform, the same as what Kelsey and Matt uses, and and RoboFun as well. It's a fantastic application, and we use that to teach coding to kids. But then as of March, we shifted completely and totally to going online. And so the question was, what has changed since you've been going online? And it's basically like everything in our entire company changed, which is probably, well, except for maybe Kelsey, who started it online, and maybe others who've been online. We were not online. We were very focused on physical building, touching things with your hands. And so we changed our designs, we changed our curriculum, we changed our entire production setup. We changed the way we teach. And we also, a big change for me was the way that I led the company, which I think I'll talk about in a second, but it connects to what a lot of everyone else is talking about here. So we're known to have really innovative, kind of quirky designs of robots that make people laugh. And oftentimes they're kind of complicated. And oftentimes the robot won't quite do what we want it to do. So we would have a teacher physically next to the kid that could tweak the little bolt or move the little thing, and and then the robot would work. And so my teachers were like highly trained individuals that would know what to do when something basically got jammed. And so we had to step back and say, oh my goodness, we're not going to be physically next to these kids. How are we going to redo this design? So we worked a lot on that. If anybody wants to ask questions, I can talk about that more. We also have classes where it's like inventors. So it's kids that have been at our class for a long time, and they come in and they used to come to our wall of parts, and they would make their own robots, however it is that they wanted to make them. And so that is a challenge that I think kind of speaks to what Ella was saying, is how do you make sure that for those advanced individuals that want to have a challenge, how can you do that in a safe and still challenging, but it needs to be safe. Like, we can create short circuits and we don't want to do that. So how can you make sure that there's enough materials that allows for this freedom to build, but also is safe? And then we also had to figure out how can we remotely configure programmable robots without kids and parents feeling sad. So that was one thing we had to work on. We also had to revamp our entire production line setup. So I don't know if anyone is interested in this, but we have physical stuff. We used to bring the physical stuff to the stores, and then the kids would build all these physical things. The pandemic shut down our facility completely. And so we had to distribute our entire production model across 10 employees' homes. And then we had to have our delivery guy go from home to home to home to move this part to this part and then assemble it at another place. And then we had to figure out, how do you direct ship materials to customers, which is just something we've never done before. So I don't know if people care about that, but if you do, I can talk about that. The other thing we had to rethink is our teaching methods. So we are very much a tactile company. We really focus on the different types of learners. How do you teach this type of person? How do you teach that type of person? And how do you do this in this online world? So one of the things that we did in the pandemic is we promoted one of our lead teachers, and we said, your job now is to figure out, how do you teach children online and still have it be engaging and still catch all of these different types of learners. We get a lot of kids with IEPs, we get a lot of kids with ADHD, we get a lot of kids on the spectrum. So kids just learn all different ways, and how can we make sure that we are still being accessible in all ways? And so we have an individual that is working on that. He's even
Jenny, I'm wondering if you can help parents and teachers by a couple examples that would help them at home.
Sure.
That'd be great.
From a teaching standpoint.
Yeah.
I mean, just like, I wish we had brought Christopher, and he would be so much better at this than me, because now I'm the boss and not the teacher.
Yeah,
but
I relate to that.
Like, make sure you're using the camera. And this is a part that was on my desk, but like, here's a part. Everybody find this part. Okay, you are going to find two parts. One is little and one is big. So it's like, how can you use your hands to make sure that you're kind of teaching it? How do you make sure that, I don't have anything here, but like, how do you make sure that when you want the child to show their screen of I'm not building anything, but pretend I was, how do you make sure that that angle is happening correctly? So yeah, those are the types I don't know that I have like any incredible things,
Sure.
but
okay.
we have basically created little training videos that we then trained our teachers on, like, oh, these are kind of the best practices. We've made little practices videos from our recordings and said, okay, this is all the things that we found that work really well.
Okay. So do those videos go home, or those are for your teachers to use to make them be able to teach better?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have like a cheat sheet of parents. These are types of things that you might want to be thinking about. One of the things that we've actually found is that, I'm sure everybody else has found this too, parents want to jump in more. So when we were our own physical space, the parents didn't exist in the space with us. So we allow children to fail. It's a big thing that we do. They're not going to hold the screwdriver the way an adult does. They're not going to probably turn the screwdriver the right way. They're going to tape it kind of clunky and it might fall apart.
Right.
But that's real important. And what we found is, like, we have parents that are like, oh, you're not doing that quite right. Come here, let me have that, and then the parents maybe will take it. And so we have come up with a lot more of teaching strategies of how to kindly tell the parents, you step back for a second, actually, let's allow this child to do this. In the end, we want our kids to feel empowered that they created it and that they built it and they know how to fix it next time. So we have a lot of like strategies around that.
I just want to jump in and say, I think that's very interesting because, and I think you and I have a lot that we could talk about, but one of the things that we have is that our parents are like, we want an hour. We bought a class, don't bother us. And it's a different message that I'm hearing from you. And
I feel like it's 50-50.
Yeah.
Half the parents are like, I'm done. I'm going to go over here and drink a coffee. Let me be. And then half of them are like, what are you doing? Oh, can I see that robot? And then and then like we had this one where the grandma wouldn't let anybody build anything. And we had to be like, grandma, give that kid that space. So I think it's, that's the thing. Everything is like somewhere along the spectrum. Yeah.
Right. I think maybe we need another another symposium, which is about all the very funny moments.
Yeah. Oh man, how many times that we've seen people with no clothes on. But the other thing that I do want to bring up. So I'm coming at this more as a leadership or as an administrator, since I'm the owner of the business. We have 25 employees, and we luckily didn't have to lay anybody off during the pandemic. But one of the things that I just want to talk about, in case there are administrators here, and it really relates back to what Carlos was saying and what Tess was saying, which is I've learned to lead the company very differently during this time. So March of 2020 was incredibly tough. There was so much thrown at all of us, like everybody in this Zoom room had so much thrown at you. And I was like, oh, I need some help. And the place that I got my help was from this amazing team that I had. And what I learned is that I needed to figure out, like, how can I delegate as quickly as I can? And how can I allow people that maybe wouldn't have stepped up before the space and the opportunity to really take on kind of major initiatives that we were going to have to do, because this was such a major transformation. And the other thing is, we're in this pandemic in a time where a lot of eyes are being opened wider to the racial injustices of the world. And I have a very racially diverse staff. And so how do I make sure that I'm supporting everybody, but also allowing us to grow and allowing us to feel empowered? So I think, to Carlos's point, you just have to kind of let go, and you just have to say, let's do this. Let's come together kind of as a team. We're all going to try. Some things are going to be great. Some things are going to be not so great. And that's okay. But allow individuals. So I don't think so much as from a student standpoint, for me in particular, because I'm thinking a little bit more of my teachers, but how can you let your teachers come at you with these wonderful ideas? And what I found is that my business has never been stronger. Our team has never been tighter. We've been working on how to have difficult conversations around race for many years, but with George Floyd's murders and everything that was happening, we've been having a lot of conversations about everything. We've been having a lot of conversations about the business. People are just bringing things up that hadn't been brought up before. And we've turned this corner to this really great place. And we're selling classes worldwide now. And we're no longer constrained to New York City. And we employed and kept employed all of these wonderful humans. And we created the teaching strategy that actually works. So it has been so weird, and I know everybody feels the same way, and it feels like so traumatic and so much like whew, in your face. But for me, it has been this really beautiful journey, and has created like a much stronger team.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Sure.
I want to go to some of our questions. We have 2 questions here, and I'm going to start with the first one from my colleague Bakhtiar. Are there materials and strategies to help parents and teachers turn the wonderful observations the times we are living through is the curriculum? Okay, something I said right at the beginning of this panel, into accessible and successful learning experiences for students. How best can parents support teachers in this type of work? Okay, I'm going to start with the first thing that, as a mom who ended up homeschooling, partially because there wasn't great communication between the parents and the teachers. You got to start by parents wanting to talk to teachers and vice versa. And that in our life is not so easy. But perhaps during the pandemic, it's a little easier because we're so isolated and we really value conversation, I think, in a different way. So does anyone have any other answers for that? Very easy question, that question. Let's start with Tess and then Kelsey.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we've heard a lot of brilliant and lovely people speak throughout the day about empathy and equity and social justice education. I'll say from my own standpoint, for both parents and teachers and educators of all stripes, don't be afraid to open up a conversation, and don't be afraid to bring that into your classroom space or into your home. I think it's a challenging proposition, certainly. It's a scary thing to do, to say, I'm going to talk about race today in my classroom, or I'm going to talk about sexual and gender identities today in my classroom or today in my home. Those things can feel scary, and they can feel like not safe conversations. And I think particularly as educators and parents looking out for, the best interests of kids, we want their lives to be sunshiny and rosy. And so it's easy for us to say, let's not bring that here. Let's leave that out there. But we know that that's not how our students and our children experience the world. They experience the world in all of its colors, rosy or not. And as a white person who has a lot of privilege, when I step into a classroom space, I think it's my responsibility to bring social justice conversations into that space. The point of privilege and the great thing about having privilege is it lets you do these kinds of things. And so, I have the privilege to be able to command a classroom. I have the privilege to be an educator. I have the privilege to have, the education that's put me into this place. And so it's my job. It's my job to acknowledge the lived experiences of the students I work with. I work with a lot of underserved youth, a lot of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. And it would just be reckless, I think, for me to not bring it into the classroom. And so those things can start really small. They can be scary. But, a thing we've started and really pushed for in the online world, as you can see in my name here, is putting pronouns everywhere. And so that can be the beginning of a conversation. And so it doesn't have to happen in a huge way, but put your pronouns on your Zoom name, put your pronouns on your email signature, signal to students that you are a safe space to have these conversations, that you are a safe person to, bring these kind of topics up with, and be radically vulnerable about it. Say you don't know when you don't know. Acknowledge your own privilege. Acknowledge that your experience isn't the same as the kids you teach, or even your own kids as a parent. Your experience is very different from theirs. So be vulnerable. Obviously, Carlos said this earlier. Be appropriate about it. There's a different level depending on the age group of kids, but be really vulnerable about what you do and do not know, and let kids bring their own experience and their own voices into the classroom. I know with my work at the ROM, we talk a lot about, because we work with Indigenous topics, we talk a lot about racism and issues facing Indigenous folks all across Turtle Island. And so when we do that, what is the best part of those conversations is always not me standing at the front of the room and talking about it. It's opening it up and saying to kids, what is your experience of this? And if you are white or not racialized, what do you think this makes other people feel like? Engage those really critical empathy skills. So yeah, that's my thought.
That's very helpful. Carlos, did you want to say something? No, I thought I saw a hand raised up. Okay. I want to add that, okay, I'm going to add something and then turn it over to Carlos. And then we're going to move to one more question unless somebody has something else to say. I want to add that I think part of the reason it's so hard is because we have no training in this, and we have no, and we didn't grow up having these difficult conversations. So as a company, we did a cultural competency training that I am happy to share with anyone who we used, and I'd have to look it up, but it isn't really one training. We are going to continue and do more and more. It's a little bit like when parents say, oh, well, we did coding, so what else can we do? And I want to say, well, did you do one Spanish class, or did you do these things go deep. And so I think, Tess, your comments about the she and her and the pronouns is a really good one. And all of your comments were good. So thank you. Carlos, did you want to add something?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was just giving snaps to Tess.
Okay.
I agree very much.
Okay. Kelsey.
I had a note just about this idea that the times we're living through is the curriculum. And also, Ella, you had said like this issue of turning cameras on, things like that, and teachers asking kids to turn cameras on. I think one of my biggest tips for teachers is to just adjust your expectations. Why do you need to see that kid? Why do they need to have their camera on? If they don't need to have it on, it's stressful. It's exhausting to sit in front of a camera all day. I don't know who's pinning me. I don't know who's looking at me. I don't know who's doing, I don't trust these people. I don't know them. Adjust your expectations about what you're asking from your students. If you want to see them, give them a reason. All right, everybody, turn your cameras on and show us your silly hats, or whatever you, what do you want to see? Because I think a lot of teachers are used to seeing participation in the classroom as like kids sitting in their desks. And I'll tell you, just a kid sitting in their desk is not them participating. That is them not playing games on their phone, but that's not actually participation. But you can't control if they play games on their phone these days. That's out of your control. So what are your expectations for participation? If you're expecting to see 30 out of 30 squares with kids just like, so excited to be on Zoom, like you're gonna be disappointed every day. And as a teacher, that's like gonna break your heart every day. So what are your expectations? Have them turn their camera on to show you that they're safe. Let them turn their camera off and participate in the chat, or use the little like emojis up in the corner or something like that. But also my other thought to Tessa's point is to like use the moment that we're in, be judicious with what you're asking students to do. Some things, some topics, some things to cover are appropriate for synchronous learning. I think that sharing is appropriate for synchronous learning. I think that inventing something together is appropriate for synchronous learning. Why are we doing this all together? When could I just send you to a website where there are step-by-step instructions that you can do at your own pace, on your own time? Go make it on your own. I'm available via email. We're gonna show each other what we made when we come back together. But if you can, create asynchronous learning materials. So this question of how can the times we're living through is the curriculum. Use this opportunity to create a ton of asynchronous learning material and try that flipped classroom idea, right? Where the times we're living through is the curriculum. Use this time to make your curriculum accessible asynchronously. Give it to students to do on their own time, at their own pace, and then have them show you what they made when we all come back together, and we'll record the Zoom, and that will be our showcase or something like that. But to Tessa's point, like, you can talk to anybody in the world. That's what we did with a bunch of our classes with Make last summer. Like, we talked to a lady with a horse, and she showed us how to saddle a horse while we made a cam mechanism. And then she climbed on the horse, strapped the camera to the front of her, and like went for a ride. That was the lesson, right? We couldn't have done that in a makerspace. You can't bring a horse in a makerspace. It's ridiculous. But like, you can do it online. We can talk to people in Europe online. So what are the opportunities here? What can you do now that you absolutely can't do when you go back to the classroom? You could do this flipped learning model, and your principal is not going to question you. He's going to be like, oh my God, you make videos, amazing, right? But like, be judicious with how you're using your students' time and their faces, and be judicious about how you're using synchronous learning time. What are you going to do in this 30 minutes? What can they do asynchronously? Try to be kind in how you treat their time.
All right. Jenny, did you have one more comment? You looked like you might have been about to say something.
Oh no, I just thought that was so smart. Thank you.
Okay. So I had one more thought, which having gone through being a teacher, being a pretty good student, going to Harvard Graduate School, and then having a kid who, in an earlier context of conversation in the earlier panel, one's own child is often so totally different than you and has such totally different, a take on life, that it is both, very humbling. And I think teaching right now is very humbling. And we used to, in our society, teachers are here and kids are here, but we're all learning and we're all in the same place. And I think that there's a part of this online learning that is really bringing us sort of in a level place, so that may help us move to the next place. It's just acknowledging that. So acknowledging that the funnel idea just doesn't work. We're not this fount of knowledge that we're pouring into kids. We're coaches, we're mentors. So we are now ready for our final panel. And panelists, if you can hang out for another 10 minutes, it'd be really fun to get a group picture of all of us. If you can't, and dinner or children are getting the better of you, I completely understand. But I'm gonna bring Ashley on and turn everyone else's camera off. And Ashley and I are gonna do a wrap up for about 10 to 12 minutes. And we're gonna go from there. Ashley, stop video, make co-host. Oh, there you are, great. All right, and stop video. All right, Ashley, take it away. You're muted.
Yes. Hey, how's it going? I'm really excited to talk about this conference because there were so many intersecting points that I think are wonderful takeaways for us as educators, as parents, and I think will ultimately really benefit the kids and the students out there who are learning remotely for however much longer we're doing this. Fingers crossed it's not for much longer, but at the same time, you know, I think we could take advantage of the moment. One of my favorite things of the day was actually just recently mentioned, which was do what you can't. I believe this is what Tess said, and it was reiterated by Kelsey. I just really love this methodology or this ideology around how to approach the circumstance we're in, putting aside reluctantly all of the tragedy that surrounds this moment. There is an opportunity to experiment, right, with how we learn, perhaps even reach people in a way that they've not felt, you know, access to before. And I wonder, Laura, what you think about the talks that have taken place in that same ideology. Like, who today or what kind of nuggets do you think have helped you think about how you can leverage the moment?
Sure. First, I want to acknowledge, thank you, Bakhtiar, for staying on this long, and your questions were very, very helpful. I think one of the big questions, or one of the big comments, is that this is the curriculum, is something that I think that we're often want to be cheery and happy with kids and, oh, we're going to build robots. But you know what? Guess what? This is the curriculum. Yeah, we're going to get to the robot. We're going to get to coding or animate or whatever we're doing. But we're here to be together to talk, so that to not ignore what's going on. And I would say that early on in the talk, I was incredibly struck by Fred's comments about that learning is about mutual trust and compassion, and that the foundation is relationships. And I was very moved by that.
Yeah, I love that. I wrote that one down too. And I think, you know, the act of mutual trust, I think also needs to acknowledge just like a general act of kind of feeling into the dark. I think to be able to create an opportunity where your students trust you to try to make the best experience possible, and that you trust them to lean into that with you, I think is a really beautiful philosophy, and also something that I think is worth just admitting in your class right away, that like, trust me, I've got you. And like, let's walk through this with the most, with making the most of what we have. I think that's really hard to, I think that's something that, whether you've embedded it into your curriculum from, you know, the times before the pandemic or not, that's something that's really hard to avoid. You know, I think that's really something that I think a lot of us will have to learn and carry forward after the pandemic is over.
A couple of other thoughts that came to mind, and if there are any other thoughts from our audience of the comments that really got you thinking, is Kim's comments about that we're really, you know, as business owners, we're wildly pivoting. Yes, and that part we're not slowing down. But in terms of how to be with your children as parents or as teachers, we all really do need to slow down. And that's not negative. That's not all negative. There's some real positives. I find in my daily life, I'm noticing things that in my former life of going to 2 or 3 schools a day, checking out how the school is going or selling a program. I used to come home and that was my 3-borough day. I made it to Queens, Staten Island, and then I had to stop in Brooklyn. I don't have that. And the moving slower can be very, very good. I'm reading more. I'm in a book group now reading Swan's Way by Proust, which goes so slowly and beautifully. I think that the comment that Kelsey just made, which do what you can't normally do. You know, how to make this time into lemonade? It's, you know, there are lemons, and how do we make the lemons into lemonade? It's really important to think about that.
Yeah, and I think leaning into the learning that's available in the rooms around you, in the environment around you. I don't know if you were part of this sourdough craze, Laura, or any of the other trends that have
I
hit us
couldn't
in
get
the
it to
pandemic.
work. I want to try again. I could not get starter to work. Anyway.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky. And I think what I've really loved seeing is in the act of slowing down, I think we've recalibrated some of our values as people. Maybe we want to spend more time with our family. Maybe we want to spend more time reading or resting, because we don't have the distractions of trying to be in many boroughs at once. And I guess also what's really lovely about that is I'm starting to see a little a slight shift in curriculum that incorporates those things as well. So I saw recently, like, you know, thinking about how the science exists in food and how you could bridge those two things, since people are spending a little more time cooking, how you can connect that to curriculum. I saw this really great workshop around, you know, binary code, and I think it was like Cheerios and Shreddies or something like that. And I think that there's a lot to think about in terms of how you embed maybe life-related activities into your curriculum, or play in a new way. We're in a novel situation where all kids are Zooming from the same place where their toys exist, like folding those two things together. I've seen a little more of that since maybe December or November.
Right. I think that that's really good. We too much, and I think everyone on the panel would agree with this, we too much look at learning like, okay, now is the robot town, now is the this time and the this time, but real learning, everything, you know, I have this exercise that I do with people, and I say, think about your childhood and what was one of the most important learning experiences that you have had, that you know, that comes to mind. And for me, it might be some of the kind of naughty things that I did in upstate New York, like figure out how to successfully cut school, but go on a 15 or 20 mile bike ride with my friends. And yes, there was the, you know, the naughty part of it, but there was also, okay, what's the route going to be? How are we going to do this? And what I find when I ask that question to many people is that their answers are often not in the classroom. And that learning encompasses much more. And when we are running great classrooms, lots of great learning happens there, but it shouldn't be a silo of just history. It should be much more all over. I was also very taken by Tim's comments in his very, the way, Ashley, you might want to connect with, you're both in Toronto, his comments about it has to be joyful. And you have to start with what the kids have at home. And the breakout rooms, I didn't want to forget that comment. Having the kids in the breakout rooms together where you're not there. I mean, I think Ella's points are really important because it's very different in high school than in middle school and elementary school, where kids can be more open and more trust may come more easily. And I think high school is really, really tricky right now because the trust hasn't been established. But in those breakout rooms, to have the kids in there alone and to have the teacher, okay, how's your room going? Everything's fine, great, I'm going to another room. And that does a nice constructivist thing of shifting, that it's not the teacher you're waiting for, you're doing your thing together as learners.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that goes back to, I mean, this has been peppered throughout the whole day, but really about the relationships in the community and feeling connected. And the truth of the matter is that when we teach in classrooms, we're not doing the one directional experience all the time, right? They're sitting in clusters at their desks, they're out at recess, they're doing like activities in small groups. And I think that it's a really great solution to have students in breakout rooms by themselves. I think that also lets them feel a little more in control of their learning, right? They can go at a pace that might suit them a little more, or maybe they can talk a little bit more about the visuals or lean into the parts that they really love. I think, you know, empowering students to be able to like adjust their speed and education a little bit throughout the day makes a lot of sense, and I think might create a greater investment from them.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
One of the things that I think is really interesting about the topic that you mentioned around history and how, you know, this is the curriculum, there's been a lot of discussion about resilience today. And I think, you know, it's such a wild time to talk about resilience because I think we're all, as adults, also trying to find extra resilience for a very difficult time, especially, outside of the student level. We are able to see and be in discourse with a lot of the tragedies and the injustices and all of the disparities of things. And I think we're all reaching for a little more resilience for ourselves. I would like to argue that, like, I think we're going to, out of this pandemic, really bring forth perhaps the most resilient student body that's ever existed.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I think that we underestimate or undervalue just how incredible it is that students are still going to school, that we are still creating classrooms, and whether they be brilliant or in progress, I think that shows an incredible amount of resiliency on the learner, right? And
Yes.
I think it's possible that this group of students will be able to learn under any condition, because we've been under such, we've been under such incredible duress. And I think that that's something that maybe goes unacknowledged.
That's great. I have a surprise idea, but of bringing us all together. It's not a surprise anymore, for a picture at the end. So those attendees are still with us. We have 33 people still, and we have panelists. But I think that I just want to address your point before we do a picture and wrap things up. And I want to thank you, Ashley, because you did a really great job of moderating this panel when I'm a little bit tired at the end of the whole thing.
You're doing great.
My point here is that I think that one of the positives is that we're asking a lot of kids to learn how to work on their own. And that's a lot of what life is. And so it's hard. It's really hard. But I think that what can help our children is if we can discuss what we're asking of them. And let them know that you don't get there by doing it perfectly the first time, or the second time, or the third time. That really we're asking them to learn how to learn about themselves as thinkers and learners. And that's a very, very big thing to do. So, okay, it looks like we can't turn on the attendees' cameras. Let's see, yeah, okay. So we're not going to be able to take pictures of you attendees. I'm very sorry. We're getting good at this new thing, but we can take the panelists. So we are going to end our conference with a picture of all our panelists and all of our support staff and all our moderators. So I'm going to start bringing you in on asking you to start your video. And I'm going to, as I do this, thank everyone. Thank my amazing co-moderators, Clay and Tom. And I'm going to thank every single person who participated, because it wasn't easy to do this whole thing. And everyone's done an amazing job. So thank you. Morelli, I want to have you in here. So while I'm doing all this technical, boring things, does anybody have any points they want to make?
I just want to say thank you, Laura, for organizing all of this. This has been really interesting to hear. We're all competitors, but we're also all very friendly with each other. Well, maybe not we're all competitors, but this has been really interesting to hear how everyone is handling this. And there's so many smart people in this room. So thank you for making this happen. It's really great.
You're more than welcome. I'm just, I think today was the day we took off our hat as being competitors. I always joke and say there's 1.1 million kids in New York City. And for what I know, that Godwin's down the street, and if I ran out of straws for a project, I know she would run to me and get me straws. And I would do the same for her. And for all of you. We're all in this.
I just want to say a big thank you to Ella, sharing your experience as a high schooler and in school right now, and just being very honest and frank about what your teachers are doing well and what they seem to be struggling with, and how that trickles down to you and your struggle. And just A moment of reassurance. I know something you said you were worried about is like, hey, I'm a junior, I'm applying to colleges, I'm worried about being behind. Luckily, literally everyone in the world has missed the exact same time amount of the world that you missed. So that's something that I've been hearing on, some podcasts and things that I've listened to, even from like college recruiters. And they're like, yeah, athletes are out of shape this time. That's all right. We're taking out of shape athletes, right? Because everybody is. So you're not any more behind than anybody else is. And as you can hear from all of these business owners, the adults are frantically trying to figure out what our next year and a half and 2 years looks like too. So moment of reassurance and a huge amount of gratitude for you sharing your experience so honestly and openly. I think I learned just a lot from listening to you. So thank you so much, Ella.
Yes, I agree. The one person I'm not seeing, I'm not sure if he left, is Clay. Is anybody see if...
Clay had to, I think, attend a meeting.
Okay, all right, just wanted to check. Okay, you ready? I'm going to do the smile. I loved doing this. We're going to do more of them. We're going to have a party when we all can have a party. And anything I'm forgetting, shout it out.
Laura, I think that it would be fun to do another get together where maybe some of us who teach there's so many people who teach online that were online today, that maybe we show some of the things that we know how to do, share with each other.
Well, this is another idea. I'm astounded and thrilled that there are 23 attendees still with us, which is incredibly cool. That each of our organizations donates 1 or 2 free things, and we put it up on a website for parents and teachers. So I'm happy to put it on our website, and I'll email you all, those of you who feel like you can participate, something. That would be amazing. And I think that's a wrap. We actually are ending only 2 minutes late, which is pretty amazing. And I gotta say, can't wait to go to the bathroom.
I'm taking my dog out now.
All right. A big, big safe hug to all our attendees. Thank you so much. And Matt and Kelsey and Tom and Clay and Morelli and Tess and Ella and Jenny and Ashley and Stephen and Karen and Kim and Godwin and Peter and Carlos. Let's keep doing great work for kids. All right. Have a great night.
Good night.
Bye.